is the one coordinator also from here. Thank you, sir. Thank you so very much.
Comrade Fidelis Okenmor found an inspiration. And that inspiration is what has given birth to what we now know as the annual Maris Public Service Lecture. Can we please give the comrade a resounding round of applause? And may the spirit and the soul of Maris Okenmor continue to rest in perfect peace. Amen. Today, they have chosen a very exciting topic, and that topic is provision of infrastructure as catalyst for growth of democratic government. As a matter of fact, I find this topic very, very timely. Because for those of us who are living in Delta States in general, and in Asaba in particular, we are all living witnesses of the impact provision of infrastructure can actually do as a catalyst for growth in democratic governments. Asaba happened to be a town I have been for a very long time. I went to my secondary school in Asaba, attended St. Patrick's College, Asaba, so I have a very long affinity with this town. As recent as 2015, they were pricing land on Okpanam Road for like 20 million, 25 million. And you have to do a lot of begging and a lot of effort to get somebody to take that land from you for that sums. Today, you want to touch land on Okpanam Road, you're hearing things like 300 million, 400 million. Somebody offered me a parcel of land somewhere in Asaba not too long ago, and I said, how much? He said 1.2. And I said, what does 1.2 mean? And the guy said, okay, 1.2 billion. I said, wait a moment. Are we talking about the same city? This is Asaba. And in Asaba today, people are calling up to ₦1 billion for an empty parcel of land. And all this is because of simple provision of infrastructure. Doing roads and opening up the city and opening up the economy so that investments can come. So today, we have a very distinguished gentleman, a man who is actually in the engine room where most of this work is being done. So today, I believe that we are very privileged to have Chief Sir Okenmor Fidelis Tilije to do justice to this topic.
At the point when I was invited to do this lecture, there were 3 topics that were sent to me, and I was expected to actually pick one out of the 3. First one was deepening Nigeria's democracy through credible electoral process. The second one was provision of infrastructure as catalyst for growth of democratic governments. And the third one was divine will as an opium for Democrats. In my confusion, and trying to actually fathom which of them I was going to choose, I overheard on radio that this has been chosen for me by Maris Council. However, the truth is that the 3 of them are actually embedded in one, because you actually need a divine will. You need a divine will to be able to bring to bear credible elections anywhere in the world. You also need infrastructural development to be able to catalyst credible election anywhere in the world. So, put together, the three of them are actually converged in all reasonable extent in one particular governance model, depending on which one you are going to choose. I tell you, after my private encounter in the business world, I was brought back into politics in Delta State sometime in 2006. And that was exactly the election that brought my dear brother, His Excellency Dr. Enweta Oduaha, into governance as governor of Delta State. And I do know that in that 2007 election, a lot happened in Delta State. I equally do know, and some of us might be able to tell that story, that in 2011 general election, it was not an easy one. It wasn't an easy one because the 2007 election was actually, how do I put it now? It was actually thrown back to us for a rerun of that election in 2011. So we had two elections in 2011, the general election and then a rerun of that year. And I can tell you that the impact of those rerun and the general election of 2011 actually precipitated what we saw in 2023. So now, everybody is beginning to understand that a one-man, one-vote is something that is critical for us to be able to catalyst economic development in Nigeria. And that is a trait and it's a fact. And so that's why I felt and thought that the three areas of topic actually are one, and really one indeed. Now, it will be amazing and indeed unbelievable for me to stand here today and begin to define what governance is, and to begin to tell us that indeed government is normally 3 tiers of government: the executive, the legislature, and then the judiciary. But what is sacrosanct in this simple definition of what governance should look like is the fact of the chronology that I just mentioned. First, I mentioned the executive, and then secondly, I mentioned the legislature, and then the judiciary. The sequence of that lineup was not just done because I just wanted to do them. I wanted to emphasize the fact that within an undemocratic line like Nigeria, the first one appears to have subsumed completely the 3 arms of government. And so the executive in Nigeria today is the one that is recognized, which is why when you have elections into those executive positions of governor and of course presidency, a lot does happen. Now the next question I should be asking myself is it true that development of infrastructure is an opium indeed for a credible election to take place? Before 2023, I would have said the answer is yes. But after the presidential election that took place some weeks ago, if you ask me now, I will tell you the answer is no. Because one will actually wonder, taking experience of the last presidential election, why the people of Asaba did not vote PDP completely. Based on the fact that indeed, just like the chairman mentioned a while ago, plot of land used to be like 20 million, now it's hovering about 1 billion naira in Asaba. Something made that increase in property to happen. Looking around Asaba, everybody will agree with me that the Senator Dr. Ifeanyi Okowa has done exceedingly very well in the provision of infrastructure in this capital city, Asaba. A lot has indeed actually happened. I am not going to be talking about the Stephen Keshi Stadium. I'm not going to be talking about the general hospital that was completed. the airport that is running, the drainages, and all that he has been able to do. But did all this provision of infrastructure made it possible for all of us who live in Asaba to vote PDP? The answer is no. Why then do we indeed have such a problem where the provision of infrastructures in Asaba did not actually tilt the voting pattern towards the presidency of Senator Dr. Ifeanyi Okowa? We'll ponder on that, and I know that all of us will be thinking the way I am thinking. It shows exceedingly that to catalyze development itself, as important as it will be, is not a recipe for a credible election to actually take place. Now, the legislature appears and should ordinarily be the only democratic institution in any democratic setting. Because you find out that at any point in time when there is military regime, what happens first is that the legislature is sent home permanently until democratic election takes place. And so the military juntas, for instance, will then manage to take care of the executive completely, and then, of course, they need the courts anyway to give some element of credibility and legality to whatever they are going to be doing in terms of acting on behalf of the people. And so, in an undemocratic setting like Nigeria, what happens is that the three arms of government are actually swallowed into one source of governance, which is the executive. And that's why people say, for instance, in the whole world, that the strongest human being on earth is the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Because he can decide whatever happens to you and me. The legislatures that are expected at any point in time to actually legislate on very reasonable policies, acts of government that should tailor the development, both economic, political, and social, of this country, are tempted to always wait to see the body language of the president before they decide to do whatever they want to do. And when the body language is negative, that becomes the end of that road for that particular bill, and to never see the light of day. The judiciary, on the other side of it, who ordinarily is expected to be the strongest arm of government, because it does the interpretation of whatever law that is assented to by the president, appears to look the other way in an undemocratic setting like ours in this country. And so, we now find people who shop for judgments, and the judges themselves are willing to sell at any point in time to the highest bidder. And so who is the highest bidder? By a highest bidder, most times, is the executive. And so they can easily acquire. And then the conscience of the judiciary is now completely put in abeyance. So that is the unfortunate situation we find ourselves in this country. And so the legislature cannot watchdog the executive, and the judiciary cannot watchdog the executive, and therefore the executive becomes the determinant of whatever policy sees the light of day, and also even does the interpretation of whatever judgment that comes from the court of law, to the extent that they are the ones who will intend to actually put up a bill together. They also intend in signing it into law, and at the end of the day, they also determine the interpretation that is given to that particular act by the judiciary. So we are all, therefore, almost in a very terrible situation where the president of the country practically determines what happens in the legislature, determines what happens in the judiciary, and at the same time determines what's happened in the executive. So the three arms of government squarely lies in the hand of one man who decides what he does with that particular power, which is expected ordinarily to be given to him by by the democratic process, which ordinarily should have been your vote and my vote to determine who should be. Now the fact that even when the Supreme Court is expected to be next to God, when even those judgments are passed, it's difficult for the executive to implement. So we won't be going too far to find examples of this, because we do know that when Zaka, the sheikh from Kaduna, was actually arrested and put in prison, and there were several judicial pronouncement judgments actually requesting that he should be released, the Buhari administration looked the other way. Even the Nnamdi Kanu issue, with several judgments and all that, still looking the other way. Even during this recent time, when we talked about the redesign of the Naira notes, the same thing also happened. The Buhari administration decided to pick and choose when to implement the interpretation of the Supreme Court and when not to actually do that. Indeed, and very unfortunately, the legislators, even when they have a say, are also intertwined into personal intent and personal selfish reason on what at any point in time is the bill that they actually deliberate upon and then send to the presidency for assent. I will recall very vividly when my brother Senator Nwaboshi did a bill, and the essence of that bill was actually to promulgate a law that will make public officers not be responsible as to the acts they have done until after 5 years. Sorry, until after 3 years. It used to be just 3 months. Within 3 months, you are supposed to be faced with the consequences of your acts. But the bill he did introduce was to the extent of moving that 3 months to 3 years. And then even the Section 7 of the AFCC of 2004 is also a very good example of what legislators can do because of selfish reasons. And that Section 7 did say that the banks will have a responsibility to keep all documents of their customers with a period of 10 years. It's only after 10 years that that document can be destroyed because of purposes of taking cognizance and sequences of whatever is demanded of that customer at the point in time. But the legislators, during the amendment, decided otherwise. And as I speak today, they've watered it down from 10 years to 5 years, which means that the bankers can decide to destroy whatever documents of the customer they have after 5 years, instead of indeed waiting for the 10 years that was initially intended by the people. Because once the constitution is made and an act of government is assented to by the president of the country, it becomes a responsibility and the power of the people that is actually then being adhered to and practiced. Now, the other very contentious issue, which we also have in trying to galvanize towards credible election in Nigeria, is what happens during the primaries of political parties. As we speak today, and I think as it has been, the primaries of most political parties, if not all, does not throw up the best. And if it doesn't throw up the best, then there is a problem. So the primaries in themselves are like cash and carry. We are all here in 2022 when the primaries of the presidencies were conducted in Abuja. And then you find out where an individual in APC, for instance, picks up a form and pays 100 million naira for the form he has picked. Then what happens on the primaries day? You see so many of them standing up and say, oh, sorry, even though I paid 100 million naira for this form, I'm no longer interested in participating. I'm stepping down for the Milo coffin. So that is the kind of thing we see in this country. If you actually went out and had worked to be able to have 100 million naira of your own and you use it to purchase a product and you are on your own destroying that product that you have purchased, then clearly you must be a madman. But if the money comes to you by just loyalty, what happens? You can freely give out because you are just returning it back to the person who gave it to you. Now it's the same way because we have left professionalism to favoritism and nepotism. We have run ourselves into a very dangerous corner. Where for me, I do not see any credible election happening in Nigeria in the farthest future. And that is the truth. It's a debatable issue, but from what we have seen from experience, what we do is choose my people. What we do is to get extremely very nepotic. And then what we do is favoritism. And so sometimes he also does the same thing when you talk about appointments of those who are in power. It happens the same way. Because at the end of the day, you are tempted to begin to compensate somebody who you know clearly is a tout just because he helped you in rigging an election or destroying the votes that were supposed to be cast, as the case might be. And because the governance of the people, who ordinarily is supposed to have been the government of the people, for the people, and by the people, has now been intertwined into one particular individual called the executive, a lot is then happening because we now find ourselves running a fascism, as it were. And so because they have the powers, they have the money, the tendency is that we find ourselves in such a situation that we are unable to help ourselves. So we have a situation where we have a flow of drugs, flow of arms, both small and light weapons, and extreme human trafficking in this part of the world. And I'm talking very seriously. If you do not actually appoint or elect your best in any election or in any appointment processes, you cannot be in a position to build a strong institution. And you need a strong institution to be able to catalyst the economic development of your people, politically, socially, as the case might be. You need a strong institution to be able to stand the temptations that the executive or whoever shall be will come to tempt you. You need a strong institution that will be independent enough to decide on certain issues based on variables that have been analyzed and agreed in a very credible format and evidenced by certain documents that you can see. And then anybody who actually follows that decision process will then say, oh yes, this is the fact that should be. Now, what has also impacted very negatively in the process of credible election and allocation of fair resources in this part of the world is that the issue of election and selection of those who govern us are determined by very simple sample minority. If you find out the level of those who actually came out to vote in this last election, you will wonder where somebody who maybe scored about 12.something million votes, we say he's the president of a country that has 200 people as a population. So you find out that the sample size that determines he who governs and he who appoints, at the end of the day, is a select of some very simple sample of the population. And once that happens, it becomes a problem. And once that problem begins to creep in, it gets elongated to the extent where it becomes extremely very dangerous in politics. Now, what we have also seen in Nigeria is the pressure of equality. Because apart from the fact that those who actually come out to vote are just a small minority of the total population, we find ourselves in such a way now that the issue of equality becomes a serious danger in Nigeria. And that's why you will hear, oh, we have not been given an opportunity to be president of this country. And so the Igbos will say, oh, it must be us now. If it is not us now, then it won't happen. And then when you begin to talk about equality, sometimes you react in an ethnic situation, ethnic process that also gets a very negative retaliatory responsibility from the others who are not from that your ethnic language. Which is exactly what happened, for instance, in Lagos. Because you find a situation where the Igbos in Lagos, because of ethnicity, decided to vote Labour at all costs. Meanwhile, the Yorubas reacted in an irresponsible manner to the extent of saying, okay, you want to tell us that you want to vote for your Igbo man. We own the land. We will not allow you to vote. So that's exactly what happened in Lagos, to the extent that people now were disenfranchised from actually casting their votes. So that struggle for equality must be such that cannot be there and should not be there. There should be a plain platform upon which all of us must strive. And so that if you have an equality with me, it means that at any point in time, I don't even need to know where you're coming from. I don't know who you are. But at the end of the day, if you are the best, you should ordinarily be chosen. Now, so the other issue is the support of, because I supported you before, you must support me. And that's how Tinubu came with Emiloko. I supported you, Buhari, so you must support me. And so at that point in time, when Buhari is now beginning to feel, oh, I think I'm doing something wrong, I should give back to that who supported me before, he becomes complacent. And because he became complacent, he then allowed INEC to be extremely irresponsible and complacent. And so all the processes of the election, ordinarily that would have been adhered to by INEC, was thrown completely to the winds. Because at that point in time, the executive that is supposed to decide what will happen with the INEC chairman is part of the conflict. And so what happens at the end of the day? Nothing actually gets to happen. And so equality, the level of participation in any election, and the issue of ethnicity is a very dangerous one in the real sense of it. So unfortunately for us in Nigeria, Nigeria is built on a tripod of major three ethnic groups: Yorubas, Igbos, and Hausas. And unfortunately, even within the tripod of the ethnicity, is also laid upon another false foundation of religion, which is also three, in whichever way you count it. So you have Christianity, you have Muslims, and then you have others. Paganism, as the case might be. So you have three wrong tripods built on three wrong religion and faith. Unfortunately, in Nigeria, some of us think that there is nothing like death. Death will never come. And so when we acquire wealth, we acquire it so much that we don't even bother to know that sometime, someday, you will go to the other side beyond. And some of us below are going to live for eternity. I'm going to be living eternity, so therefore, let me just keep the funds. Let it come growing. We're not saying billionaires who do hard work are not around. They are clearly around. But for those who acquire stupidly, they are those who acquire and don't also put those funds that they have acquired into productive use for the benefit of the people. And so they acquire, they don't create employment, and so they dampen the economic growth rate of the environment that they find themselves. One other very serious contentious issue is, of course, it's actually not just one, so many indeed, but we can put all of them in one basket. We talk about poverty. Sometimes when we are playing and we say poverty is a cause, some people think it's a joke. It's not a joke. But unfortunately in Nigeria, we are poor in money and at the same time poor in mind. Poor in money because even the World Bank itself and virtually all research fellows will tell you that there are minimum level of capital that is required by an individual to live a dignified life of purpose. So when they hear your name, they want to do what you want them to do because they believe in you. And because they believe that you will do more if you have that opportunity. But here, what do? We either rely on religion or rely on ethnicity, stupid ethnic languages, and then me rich, me local. Those are the syndromes that drive the processes and the powers with which we make our decisions. And so the moment you are driven by those negative variables, nothing good comes out of it. That's why I keep saying that I doubt if my generation will see a credible election in this country. So, if Okowa did all he did, I'm sorry I'm mentioning his name severally, because I think that this 2023 election is going to be a very serious case study in so many universities of the world, very shortly. If he did all he did, and yet we could not vote for him, the next person that will come, if he's a devilish mind, will say, well, the man tried before now, they don't vote for him. Why me I go try? They're not going to vote for me, so I cannot even try. So let me just take whatever I need to take and get out of the system. And don't think about anybody voting for me. But ordinarily, we need to begin to change the side of Nigerians. Our social responsibilities are no longer what it used to be. And if I make you want to send me to jail, let me say this. The social norms that we find in our system is such that is very mind-boggling. When, for instance, you see an undergraduate lady with a 500,000 naira wig on his head, and then he carries a 200,000 naira mobile phone, you begin to wonder, how did this lady get this kind of assets that she's carrying? Some of us, including me, we are guilty. Because if we don't buy for them, they won't use them. But we give it to them very proudly. Oh, she's carrying 500,000. And indeed, it's a shame because the lady also gets home and then misses family, father and mother, and shows up the phone, mommy or daddy, I bought this phone for 500,000. Mommy, daddy says, oh, the phone is very nice. He's not going to bother about how the source of the phone. He or she is not bothered. Welcome, my daughter. In fact, it will amaze you actually, because sometimes when I find certain stories, I honestly feel like committing suicide.
If the Commissioner for Finance, in whose portfolio promoted infrastructural development, cannot tell us what they did, who else will do? I thought it was a missed opportunity. So I want to start with my colleagues here. How do you see infrastructural development? Because none of you here is less than 5 years. Now, and what it was for now. I'll start with
presidential democracy. Now, we will note that there are other forms of governments all over the world, such as monarchy, isn't it? Dictatorship, oligarchy, and so on and so forth. But for us, what we desire is democracy. And what this subject is talking about is the growth of democracy or democratic government. And it is thought that when you provide infrastructure, then democratic governments will grow. That is the desire of everybody. Dividends like freedom, liberty, prosperity of the people, several other gains of democracy. And it is thought, or it is believed, and I agree, that when infrastructure is provided by the government of the day, then these gains will be achieved. Thank you, sir.
we seem to all agree. Chief Oyibo, sir.
Yes, thank you very much. Let me quickly say that by the grace of God, I've had the privilege of passing through the administration of His Excellency Ifeanyi. I was also there in the movement of His Excellency Dr. Okowa, and I'm here now in the past 8 years with Senator Dr. Ifeanyi Okowa. Let me say without any fear or any equivocation, there is no doubt. And I think Dr. Ubo can bear me out. And His Excellency, Senator Ifeanyi Okowa, have done wonderfully well, marvelously. And that's the truth. That's why I said that I was not comfortable when our lecturer said that maybe because of our people do not appreciate what he has done in Asaba. I think His Excellency has done so well in terms of infrastructural development. When you're talking about roads, you say it's a road master. We're talking of insurance scheme. We're talking of health-wise. In fact, there's no area that Excellency has not joined the past 8 years. And that's the truth. Without, even in rural areas. For instance, like I am from one place called Warri North. From Gogo to where I am, you need to take a boat and go very close to the Atlantic Ocean. We have a fruity market in that place. In fact, it's unprecedented in the history of this country. And if you go to areas like Budu, where you don't expect to see roads, you see concrete roads. In the riverine areas. Not of when you come to Warri or that place. I want to say that in scoring His Excellency, I will give you nothing less than 90%. That's the truth. We are talking about the schools.
To 100% and above, if that's possible. It's done really well in education, in health, in all aspects. And I think he has done it efficiently, he has done it effectively, and he has also done it fairly.
Well, I don't know if I'm the right person to answer that question. But from my comments, you know that I made it very clear that the PDP is successfully brought back to government because of the level and intensity of infrastructural developments that the governors of PDP have engaged in. Now, stricto sensu for Dr. Okowa, I would say I would call him an A+. I'll call him an A+, and I am prayerful that the next government will also strive to score an A+.
Your Excellencies, Honorable Chairman, for this occasion, please just permit me to stand on already existing protocols. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you today as a representative of the special guest of honor, His Excellency Dr. Emmanuel Eweta, the immediate past governor of Delta State, who due to very unavoidable circumstances cannot be present. He sends his warmest regards and his greetings. Looking at the topic of discussion, I have penned down a few words that reflect the thoughts of His Excellency, and in some instances are direct quotes. When we talk about infrastructure, we speak about development, growth, sustainability, advancement, and the satisfaction of people. The consistent growth of any nation's infrastructure is the catalyst and most important factor for nation building. A holistic view of infrastructure that is both economical and social is important in developing the basis of any society, be it rural or modern. Adequate provision and attention for both are the foundation on which any government is built. To a large extent, the adequate provision and accessibility of infrastructure in Nigeria today are skewed. The majority of Nigerians are overlooked, and this has been a challenge in many parts of the country for years. Without the right infrastructure, the average Nigerian is merely surviving rather than thriving. For example, an economic infrastructure the lack of constant power supply across our nation has hindered our economic growth. Businesses suffer and the cost of living increases. With access to basic amenities, individuals in any given society thrive, and this rubs off on any sitting government as a positive mark. The local economic development of our nation rests on the availability of solid infrastructure, which is likely to spur socio-economic development and lift millions of Nigerians out of poverty. However, with a struggling economy, we have been unable to register consistent growth. One major factor out of many will be the lack of continuity from one government to the next. With breaks and halts in between, it becomes almost impossible to build a consistent line of functional and working infrastructure. This is something we must address and create a working model that enables continuity and sustainability. Professor Okowa once pointed out, development is not about the number of roads constructed, as important as that is, but the indigenous contribution to the provision of such amenities. Amenities that generally improve the standard of living of citizens in any given society. The role of any government is to improve the lives of its citizens by providing essential systems and services that are necessary for survival first and then growth. This is largely where good infrastructure plays a role. The provision of sustainable infrastructure can be defined as good governance. Good governance in our age and time is an integral part of democracy. It is acting in accordance with the law, enthroning ennobling values, and strengthening state institutions with a view to getting them to perform to the expectations of the people. Good governance is the making and implementation of policies that have a positive impact on the citizens of the country. This means aligning public policy with social needs. Governance, therefore, denotes how people are ruled, how the affairs of the states are administered and regulated, and how the politics of the nation are carried out. Infrastructure development in democratic governance involves identifying the right projects, carrying out feasibility and viability studies, and carrying out the physical development of the project such that it gets to the right people and is equitably distributed. When citizens make progress, it reflects positively on the government. Providing infrastructure in areas like education, health, labor, agriculture, technology will boost the standard of living of citizens in any given society. And this reflects well on the government as an effective and efficient one. In democracies particularly, the provision of infrastructure is a fulfillment of promises made while seeking the votes and the approval of the people. And when promises are fulfilled, trust is built. Citizens grow to have faith in the institutions that govern their lives. Recently, in a conversation with members of the Finnish government, I asked why Finland has been rated the happiest place in the world 6 years in a row. And his response was, we trust. We trust one another, we trust in our institutions, and we trust in the government's ability to take care of its people. If we want to make Nigeria and Delta State a happy place, we must instill trust in our people. And one way to do that is to keep our promises about providing sustainable infrastructure for the people. In moving forward, in creating better infrastructure, we must open our doors largely to collaborations and partnerships between the government and the private sector. Delta State should be known as a model for successfully completed public-private partnership projects that are long-lasting and functional. Our projects must cut across all sides, not just the major cities in the state, but also rural development. It can be a project on affordable housing, rehabilitations and management of public schools and public healthcare centers, building community centers to foster a sense of unity among the people, agricultural processing factories, and affordable sustainable power access. The possibilities are endless. Finally, moving into a new government dispensation is a time for hard work. I call on all committed, knowledgeable, and mature leaders to step forward to pick up the pieces. Our infrastructure programs should be designed with an eye towards diversifying and encouraging development outside the oil economy. We have been blessed with the resources and manpower to build a thriving ecosystem for our people, and this comes from embracing the importance of infrastructure and the roles it plays in the lives of our citizens. When we make this our highest priority, we are confident that we will deliver on our promises and create a very trustworthy society. After all, this is what any government wants. Let me say congratulations to the Marriage Council and to Comrade Fidelis Okenmor. I hope I didn't murder that name. For your consistency, your passion, and your strength. I thank you for having me here today, and I thank you for your attention.
I have a slightly different view on assessing what happened at the last election, looking at it with the spectacle of our guest speaker. We should not assess this last election based on the outcome of the presidential election. That would be an error. On that same day that the presidential election took place, Delta State lost to Labour Party. But on that same day, the grassroots election, which is the House of Representatives, Labour Party got only 2, and PDP had 7. When you are doing assessment, you must do it across board. So it is an error to say that Okowa was rejected. I don't think that is correct. Permit me to say that we must lay the blame at the feet of those who communicate government activities. I want to say categorically that the communication department of the government is not effective enough in telling the people what the government is doing. Dr. Igbo was referring, the community was referring to the floating market. I was there in 1970 after the Civil War. I was born and brought up in the North. After the Civil War, I came home and I went to my mother's village. That's what we do. It's my mother's village. I know the place. It was not until when the election was to take place that I knew about that floating market. I went there to remove my sister, my immediate junior sister. I took her away from them because of the fear that if you know what happens there, but it is a thriving fishing community. And now there's a multi-billion naira floating market, and nobody heard about it until the election took place. Thank you. So I want to say that the government publicity machinery is not effective enough.
That the provision of infrastructure is key to the development and the improvement of democracy in Nigeria. I also have a counter view to point out. One thing is to provide infrastructure, and another thing is for the people to be able to access this infrastructure. Maybe people here will agree on the topics and how it was rightly addressed, because virtually everyone here perhaps are people within the average range of livelihood. I have been running an organization where I mentor and educate teenagers and youth since 2018 till date. And I put it boldly to this house that our people at the rural areas, not many of them can be able to access a hospital, which is an infrastructure that has been built by the government. Reason is because, depending on the situation they are facing, they cannot be able to afford the medical bill. Secondary schools, a woman who has 3 children, we have to pay well over 15,000 in a term as school fees. How many poor people at the rural areas can be able to afford that? I boldly and effortlessly spread it all. Firstly, I will seize this opportunity to say thank you to my father and our keynote guest speaker.